The 31st of October 2025 marked 15 years since The Walking Dead started, so today I'm going to show you my completely new and updated The Walking Dead Iceberg. If you don't know already, an iceberg is a chart with tiers of popularity. At the top, there's the stuff you might already know, but the further down we go, the more obscure stuff becomes. I've made this chart myself and there's 5 tiers: the surface, underwater, murky waters, the deep, and dark unknown. Press the like button on the video if you can, and make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell set to all so you never miss a video from me. Let's get straight into it. The surface. Zombie. In the world of The Walking Dead, it's said that there was no zombie media, which is why they never say the word zombie.
Did you get bit?
The concept of a zombie is said not to have existed before. They predominantly call them walkers and other names similar, but in the comic universe they have said it.
The keys are on that zombie out on the street.
Which is weird because I remember hearing that from Robert Kirkman, the creator of The Walking Dead comics, and in quite a big part of the TV universe too, so it doesn't really matter. Especially when in Negan's flashback episode he's playing Gears of War 2, where in that game's universe, the concept of a zombie does exist, with the Lambent infected people.
Ma'am, are you okay? What happened?
And even traditional zombie skins on the multiplayer mode of the later games. And even then, one of the inspirations for Gears was Resident Evil that has a lot of zombies in it. All this to say it's not that strict. Wildfire, the thing that makes the walkers, that brings people back, is called wildfire due to its nature and how fast it spreads. Every human is infected, and it only affects humans. As far as we know, it doesn't affect animals. Outbreak Day. Wildfire was discovered by the CDC on April 16th, 2010, and it was declared global on August 25th, 2010. Operation Cobalt. At the start of the outbreak, in an attempt to stop the spread, the US military carried out Operation Cobalt, where instead of just taking out the walkers, they would take out civilians and destroy cities.
They used napalm, sir. Monsters. But this force, we stopped them.
The CRM. The most advanced group we've come across in The Walking Dead are the Civic Republic, or mostly known as the Civic Republic Military, the CRM. They were really secretive, so didn't let people leave once they did get in, and took out anyone who saw them. They got survivors to trade people for supplies, they experimented on people, and planned fake alliances with other big places, understood them, and then destroyed them. Like Omaha, but Portland was saved when Rick and Michonne took out that part of the CR. Whether there's any darkness to the CR still is unknown, but General Bill did mention there being spies all over the world, which we're going to get onto. A and B was the CRM's trading code, and we kind of knew that for years before, but in The Ones Who Live, Okafor confirms it and elaborates on it. If someone is traded as an A, they are people with a strength and people that can be followed and so are sent away and killed and experimented on, but Bs are just the everyday people trying to survive. JD said Rick was a B so that he could live. The alphabet was used in other places in The Walking Dead, like at Alexandria and in Terminus, but it's not suggested to be related.
4 from A, 4 from D.
Title decay. As time went on in the original show, the title would decay more and more each season. Some thought this could be showing that the walkers were also slowly rotting away, but they said let's ditch this really cool, authentic idea and take even more of the soul out of it, just completely change it. New walkers made canon. In season 1 and part of season 2, when Frank Darabont was still running the show, the walkers were quite different. They would walk faster to the point of running, they could pick stuff up, they could climb, be smart enough to know how a door works, and remember stuff from when they were alive. But after that, for the remaining seasons of the show, they would be much less capable, until season 11 episode 19 called Variant, where they made it canon that wasn't just a difference in directing, they were actually different types of walkers, which is really interesting to me.
I've heard stories about walkers like this that can climb walls and open doors. Maybe there's other kinds too.
They've not shown much of this since season 11, but Andrew Lincoln said the thing that he would return for is when the show goes back to being the horror it essentially always was. The main survivors have become so experienced and good at this apocalypse. The best way to bring them back to how it was is to make the walkers better. At the end of The Walking Dead World Beyond, they show that there is a type of walker that is stronger, faster, remembers stuff from before, and not only reanimated quicker than any walker we've seen, but was shot in the head. Some think it was her back, but that's a button on her coat. It was the head, and we know the way to take out a walker is destroy the brain, so whatever this is will completely change everything about The Walking Dead. Once it reaches any of the main characters, it's really scary, which is really good, and I think we're going to see it again quite soon. I've always said, even before we saw this end credit scene, that New Walkers is what's next after the Commonwealth, and it's always been lurking there. I just hope they make it scary and grounded, or it will just be silly. Like when Daryl arrived in France, the place that actual New Walker was, but he instead encountered walkers that were were injected by Janet and her group with this silly stuff they put in them to make them act differently. I'm glad they're staying far away from that now. I've said before, like, I think the final stage of The Walking Dead, of the main story at least, is them all having to fight the new walkers. So maybe Daryl or Carol brings up to Eugene, could you do what this woman we met in France did, and Eugene recreates it to help get rid of the new walkers? That would be cool, but leave it alone outside of that. It was just, it was silly. There are many games set in the Walking Dead's TV universe. Of course, the Telltale Walking Dead games, the VR game Saints and Sinners, and the short-lived Overkill's The Walking Dead are set in the comic universe, but there's many memorable games in the TV universe. A game that I love with all its flaws is The Walking Dead Survival Instinct. It wasn't perfect. In fact, it was quite rough, but I love to love it. It perfectly captures what it would be like to be in that time of Walking Dead in season 1 and 2. This game shows Daryl and Merle Dixon before they met the original Atlanta group, and I love it. I strongly recommend it. It's definitely clunky and old feeling even for 2013, but if you like The Walking Dead, I recommend it. There's also the Walking Dead Onslaught, a VR game set in the show. I'm still planning to eventually do one final video on to finish my series on it. Why'd you never listen? And there's the Walking Dead Destinies. It's absolutely abysmal what they did. The good thing they did was bring some of the older actors back to voice them, but that's not enough. It was just awful. It may be the worst game I've ever played. Of course, there's the multiple mobile games. Other than that, there's been some amazing game collabs where the characters are playable in other games like Fortnite and Call of Duty and Dead by Daylight, where Andrew Lincoln, Norman Reedus and Denai Guerrero voice them. Well, Denai didn't voice her in DBD, but Maggie is a legendary skin for Michonne and Lauren Cohan voices her. And it's just been announced that the World War Z game is bringing Rick, Daryl, Michonne and Negan into it, with the Walking Dead maps and a mix of slow zombies for those modes, which is amazing. Andrea's 8-year deal. So Andrea was meant to live much longer in the show and likely closely follow her comic counterpart storyline of getting with Rick and then being bitten at the end of the Whisperer War. I thought the reason they gave for killing her off was quite weird. There was a scene where she would ride into Woodbury on a horse and save everyone, but it was apparently easier to kill her.
Killing her was ridiculous.
And I feel like Rosita kind of went on to have Andrea's comic fate as she was bitten saving Eugene. All the shows. There's now 7 shows in the Walking Dead universe. The Walking Dead, the original show, Fear the Walking Dead, The Walking Dead World Beyond, Tales of the Walking Dead, Dead City, Daryl Dixon, and The Ones Who Live. And multiple webisodes that we're going to talk about later. With Dead City right now being the only ongoing one as far as we know. Daryl Dixon is about to end with season 4. Tales of the Walking Dead is kind of up in the air still. Scott Gimple has mentioned a lot that he would love to do more, so I wouldn't say it's ended. And I would say The Ones Who Live is kind of open-ended too, but I would honestly hope they make a new show for when Rick comes back underwater. Frank Darabont's The Walking Dead. Frank Darabont was the creator and showrunner of The Walking Dead in season 1, and for a short time in season 2, but in July 2011 he was fired because of conflicts with AMC and disagreeing with the production and budget of the show. When he was fired, his close to comic adaptation and everything else he planned faded away and creative control was passed on. We would have seen a much closer to the comics show, and it would have been so much darker and brutal. Many stories that were teased didn't go on to happen, and this caused a lot of upset in the cast. Jeffrey DeMunn, who played Dale, wanted to leave, and that's why he died when he did. It became an alternate universe, and many stories that were going to happen didn't happen how they were always planned to, just like the Tank Walker. Sam Witwer played the Tank Walker in the first episode, and he had his own backstory, and had Frank Darabont carried on being involved in the show, we would have seen it leading up to where he turned in the tank. They would have had multiple other main characters pass through, but Sam would be the main character. We would have had to see him take out his superior officer to save people, but he's bitten, so he crawls into the tank, and when he's about to pull the pin on the grenade to end himself, he doesn't do it. And they would reshoot the scene where Rick gets in the tank, all for this backstory on how Atlanta fell and how that grenade that would go on to save them all ended up there. I also love that Sam Witwer played Deacon St. John in Days Gone, another zombie apocalypse type game, and he's basically met Rick. There's also a bounty mission in Days Gone where you have to go and kill a Rick Marston, which of course is referencing John Marston from Red Dead Redemption, but I like to think Rick Grimes as well, given Days Gone is another zombie type apocalypse title. Deacon calls him Rick the Prick, which is what Negan called Rick, so hopefully this was a dual reference. Purple Shirt Walker. Over the years, people have picked up on this walker in particular having some sort of importance, such as a backstory we didn't get to see, or even that he recognised Rick, as walkers could do that back then, mainly because there is quite a bit of focus on it. It's almost like the show is making sure you get a good look at him, as if we're gonna need to remember for later. The actor who played him, Joe Giles, played this walker in season 2 episode 9, and this one in season 8 episode 1 in the 100th episode, which is cool, like it's secretly acknowledging it. Rick's boots and pants. Rick wore the same pair of boots throughout the whole show, and the same pants from season 2 to 9. Of course, that stopped when the CRM picked him up.
my boots and my clothes now.
Coma Theory. I think the most popular and most basic Walking Dead theory is that Rick is still in a coma, and it's one of those ones that I think are more just for fun. At this point, I don't think it would ever be revealed that Rick's just been imagining all of it and he's in a coma, and these are weird manifestations of his mind. I mean, even when Rick isn't in the shows, it could still work as Rick imagining all of it, and he's like the narrator of all these stories, but obviously it's really unlikely now. I mean, maybe in the first 5 seasons that could have been a thing, but so much has happened now, they've expanded so much. What I like about the theory is in season 1, it works well if you think Rick had some sort of subconscious knowledge and knew in the back of his mind that Shane and Laurie were doing stuff, or at least would be capable of doing that. It would make sense that he went into a coma and would wake up to see a mirror of him and Carl, where the wife of their family has turned. She's become this monster, and it would be representing how she betrayed their marriage and she betrayed their life at home. Rick's world and his trust had become an apocalypse. Daryl could be someone that he's arrested on the road, but that he always saw good in. Some of the characters could be nurses that he's seen. Other characters are people in his life that he's met before and they mean something in this vision. Beta was a famous country singer. One of my favourite backstories is that Beta used to be a famous country singer named Half Moon. In the comics, Beta was a famous NBA player. Javier in the Telltale games was a famous baseball player, so they likely knew of each other too, which is amazing. We hear Beta sing a song called I Went to the Well, and it was written by Cooper Andrews, the actor for Jerry, and Dan Fogler, the actor for Luke. The Half Moon vinyl also appears in Fear the Walking Dead Season 5 Episode 14 and in World Beyond Season 2 Episode 4. So it's a really well thought out and a really cool backstory. I just feel like after Alpha died, Season 10 was this depressing slump, just waiting for them to inevitably kill Beta off, and he didn't do anything, so it's a shame. This is why I bring up the next thing, Water Tower. So this was and still is a funny inside joke for viewers of the channel. Subscribe and be in on it. But anytime a water tower appears, we ironically love it, because a really random fate in the comics was Gabriel being startled by Beta's big horde, climbing down the ladder of the water tower he was a lookout on in a hurry, getting stuck in it and hanging there screaming. Beta then stabs him and says, "You should have whispered," and walkers finish him off. Such a cool random thing that he did in the comics that I think perfectly showed how unhinged Beta was and had become after Alpha was killed. Robert Kirkman later said he killed Gabriel off because he didn't know what to do with him, and the Whisperer arc still had an impactful end because Andrea died. So the fact that nothing happened like that in the season 10 finale, it would have been the perfect thing to adapt, to really show Beta's mad wrath, let him live up to his initial aura. Viewers caught onto a potential tease of it happening at some point in the Whisperer arc, as just before the arc started we see this in season 8, and around the time this would have happened in the show, the last episode of season 10 is episode 15 being called The Tower. The hospital they went to was called The Tower, and it was a reused building from where Beth was at the Grady Memorial, so not canonly the same hospital, but it is the same exact building they filmed it. It could still happen in the future. Rick's only just lost his hand. In the comics he lost that when the governor did it. It can happen with different characters, or even Beta with a prequel story in Tales, but the whole point of it is it was Beta taking the chains off and bringing the horde to Alexandria. Carol took T-Dog's place. So a relatively known fact now is that it was going to be Carol that died, where T-Dog did, and I spoke about this on my first Walking Dead Iceberg, but something I think is important to say is it's not true that he was killed off because the actor Ione Singleton was always late to set. There is no source to that, it's made up. Like that rumour of Andrea being killed off because the actress Laurie Holden didn't get on with anyone on set. It's made up. John Bernthal's alternate Shane scene. John Bernthal had his own vision for Shane's final scene that him and Andrew Lincoln tried to make happen. Basically, when Shane brought Rick up on that hill, he would coerce Rick to kill him, but when Shane turns, Rick would pick up Shane's gun to take him out, but when he pulled the trigger, it would click because Shane's gun was empty, and it shows Shane knew he was too dangerous to be with them still, but didn't want to kill Rick. He just wanted to make him a strong enough leader to look after Judith, and he said that even though in the end they didn't decide to go with what he wanted, there was very much a flavour of that in the scene, and it was in his head when he was playing it. The man who died twice. I'm not talking about Glenn, who had the dumpster fake out because he didn't die, but in Fear the Walking Dead Season 3 Episode 15, Madison killed Troy. He wasn't just assumed dead or die off screen. We saw his thoughts. I mean, you could rationalise how he could have survived. I did, because I thought he was a great character that should have been in the show, but it was pretty definitive. So if you're going to bring him back, like I think they should have, it better be for a good reason. Dave Erickson was the showrunner and he was leaving after this season. I think Season 3 was the best season of Fear. He had created this storyline with the Ottos that was so good, but it felt like that as he was leaving, he wanted to destroy it too and leave very little of his characters remaining. Troy was a really good, interesting character, and it was really weird when he died. I remember when I first watched it, I actually laughed after Madison hit him because I didn't realise what had happened. I didn't realise until the second swing that she had a hammer in her hand. After this, the new showrunners took over, and from there, it was basically a soft reboot and Morgan crossover. It was exciting but depressing because Nick died really early on in the season, and then Madison did. Over the years, there would be a lot of complaints about the quality of the show, and even though there were some good and enjoyable parts of the show, when it got better, it would get worse again. But they brought Madison back, and I got excited because it felt like they were listening to the feedback from viewers of the show, and was starting to give Fear parts of itself back. And with just 6 episodes left, they started to tease that Troy, that cool, intriguing character that everyone loved, was clearly coming back. And this told me that they were going to finish the show on them reviving it and sending the remaining characters into the Walking Dead universe ready to be fished back up by the next show and get more involved in the main story, but they killed him again with Alicia's skeleton hand. He was joining their side, but she had to do it, apparently. They also made up that this horrible girl was his daughter, that was his, then it wasn't, then it was again, and it ended terribly. If the show had ended with Madison, Alicia, and Troy, I would have forgiven the show and it would have lived on as a show that had these silly moments, but in the end did the right thing and corrected itself. But no. A big issue in Fear is they would try so hard to be profound. The profound meaning and moral to the story should be the undertone. When it's the main thing, characters are just being silly. They thought it was really cool and profound that she used Alicia's silly skeleton hand, but it was awful. It was genuinely awful. Fear the Walking Dead confirmed Dwayne's fate. For years, people wondered if there was more to Morgan's story of his turned wife biting his son Dwayne after he found to put her down, and Fear the Walking Dead ended up showing what really happened. The events of Fear Season 7 bring Morgan back to King County, where we find out he couldn't take out Dwayne and chained him up in the attic, which is what happens in the comics. What we see years later, he does put him down, and it puts an end to Morgan's clear mode. Season 7 myth. There's this myth that when Negan killed Glenn in Season 7 Episode 1, the viewership fell and the show died, but that's not true. There was a big jump in viewership in the Season 6 finale, as there usually was in finales, and even more in the Season 7 premiere, because it was answering that big viral cliffhanger. People tuned in for that, and after that, it kind of just returned to what it was. However, there was real viewership number drops, because AMC released AMC Premiere, where a huge amount of fans subscribed to that and watched the episodes on there as they came out early and so weren't watching it live. It's now called AMC Plus, and still continues to siphon people from watching it live, because they've already watched it early. That's been happening since 2017, around the time people say the viewership dropped. And don't forget, The Walking Dead is the most pirated TV show of all time. In regards to the actual issues with the show, without just blindly saying it got bad when Glenn died, what did start in Season 7, and I think was a big part of Season 8, were the drier, uglier episodes. Because I'm not actually saying people in general didn't stop watching, because in Season 7 and 8, I think the episodes did get worse. Bad. Which I myself felt a lack of desire to want to go to the effort of tuning into it each week. It could sometimes feel like a chore to watch. And I think it was a bad choice to have the Kingdom episode straight after Season 7 Episode 1, and then after that, they had The Cell with Daryl. So you had to wait another 3 weeks after the lineup to see how the group was doing after Abraham and Glenn were killed. So I think it was definitely harder to stick to, and Episode 4, Service, is one of my favourite Walking Dead episodes. If that had aired straight after, I think there would have been more motivation to meet all these new people at the Kingdom and not have fatigue with The Walking Dead. Because at this point, I think a lot of people started to feel it, and that was before Carl. Well, I think the show lost a big part of itself, and it's not because Carl was some amazing character that no one could watch the show without, but he was something I think vital to Rick, and so in turn the show itself. People do theorise that if he had stayed, so would Rick, as the story became less believable. Obviously, Andrew Lincoln said it was because of his family, so that's just a theory people have. But there were rumours of him wanting to leave even earlier, years before, so it's not as far-fetched to say that as soon as they diluted The Walking Dead and Rick's story, it's almost like the motivation for him to keep doing it wasn't there anymore, so that was his time to leave. Carl died, Rick left, and then Michonne did, and before you knew it, these bigger stories, a lot from the comics, were given to lesser characters with less presence, less personality. And so really it was when Carl was killed off, and Season 8 being the overall unappealing slog it was, that's when the dilution really started. Glenn beat Negan in another universe. In Invincible Season 3 Episode 8, Stephen Yeun of course plays Mark Grayson, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan plays Conquest, and they have this epic fight where Mark wins. He beat Negan in another universe, where this time he smashes his head in. Murky waters. Fake Maggie leak. week. I remember one night before season 7 episode 1 aired and the answer to who Negan killed at the lineup would be revealed, a bad quality leak came out of him choosing and taking out Maggie. Some think this was AMC deliberately releasing it so that no one knew the real answer, and they would be even more shocked when 2 people were selected. This isn't hard to believe when, as I'm sure you've heard before, and we kind of saw in the episode, they filmed all the characters dying at the lineup anyway. But this is the only leaked full scene of someone else being chosen. That was the coolest thing Maggie's ever done, and it wasn't even canon. Original ending. Season 11 was going to end with a flash forward scene with the characters' kids grown up. Absolutely abysmal. I get that it's about the future and it's cool that their kids got to go on and live, but what about the characters we've watched for years? They didn't end it with this scene because the spin-offs had to happen and, you know, Rick still hadn't come back. I'm confused why they filmed it to begin with. Won't new kids come along that they want to shove in our faces? Wouldn't they be there too? Texas is gone. In season 6 of Fear the Walking Dead, it was a race to stop the serial killer Teddy from setting off a nuke in Texas from a submarine, and it actually happened. A nuke was set off in Texas, and now in The Walking Dead, it is a nuclear wasteland. They spent season 7 of Fear in a big nuclear radiation zone like in a Fallout game. In the intro of The Ones Who Live, the CRM had even marked it as one big radiation zone. With all its flaws, Fear did a lot of monumental stuff, including upsetting me, Dead in the Water. As part of promoting the second half of season 7 of Fear, AMC released a mini-series called Dead in the Water that shows a crew of 155 aboard a USS Pennsylvania submarine as the outbreak is starting. The crew are underwater and have no idea what's going on, but start getting suspicions. One of the crew die from appendicitis and turns, which leads to the crew being taken out one by one. 4 of the remaining 9 survivors are given the message to nuke Chicago as part of what we spoke about earlier, Operation Cabalt. They don't end up doing it. But the main character of this series was Jason Riley, who was the right-hand man of Teddy in Fear the Walking Dead season 6. So this show is basically a prequel story showing how Riley ended up meeting Teddy and how vulnerable he was to be able to be brainwashed by him, and how they came to have that submarine with the nukes that would go on to nuke Texas. His wife had just had a baby and he heard them die on the phone, and he would go on to just fall as some sideman to Teddy. I enjoyed it as a whole. I do recommend it because it doesn't take much commitment. Each episode is really short, and it just goes to show that The Walking Dead's lore can be quite deep, which sometimes in Fear's wackiness you might not be able to appreciate as much, but this series allows that. It's a nice small series. Trapped Terminus guy. When Rick and the group escaped Terminus, the crazy trapped character here was one of the people who attacked the original group at Terminus and basically made them bad. Because at first, Terminus was a sanctuary.
The signs, they were real.
We used to help people. We saved people. You don't know what it is to be hungry.
For these people to turn to being cannibals, they're given a really horrific backstory that shows that they were legit at first. Sanctuary for all, community for all, those who arrive survive was a legit invitation, but in the world of The Walking Dead, perhaps naive. They were raided, beat, blocked up, and they would take their woman, and these characters had perhaps the worst treatment of most characters we've seen in The Walking Dead. They were so disturbed by what happened, they believed there wasn't any good people left anymore. Anyone else who thinks otherwise are the naive ones. They had a room full of candles with stuff written on the wall like, never again, never trust, we first. They were raided and traumatized and disturbed so bad that they would go on to lock people up and eat them. They became the selfish ones. They would get revenge on these raiders by locking them up to the point they went mad for what they did, but to turn into what they did as well assured they had the tragic ending they got. Jeffrey Grimes is now canon. There's a one-off comic issue called The Walking Dead The Alien that shows Rick Grimes' brother Jeffrey Grimes and how he was in Barcelona when the fall happened. He meets a woman named Claudia who wants to sail to the States, and they both survive for some time, but he's ultimately bitten and gives her a message to give to Rick. And recently in the Daryl Dixon show, now that they're in Spain and went to Barcelona, they've likely just made Jeffrey canon in the TV universe with this scene.
Barcelona. I have a friend whose brother lived there. Back before.
Whether they're teasing an appearance or project with him, or is just a nice reference for people that are aware of Jeffrey, isn't known for certain yet, but I kind of like that it was so subtle. Invincible references. Of course, Invincible is another one of Robert Kirkman's creations, and there's many references to it in The Walking Dead. Michonne gives Carl Invincible comics, Carl later reads one, and so does RJ. There were also Invincible figurines in Sam's room. Maybe if he actually read the comics, he wouldn't be such a puss. And of course, many of the actors in The Walking Dead went on to voice characters in the show. There's also an Easter egg to another one of his characters, Science Dog, with Carl having his symbol on his t-shirt. Season 5 episode names referencing Dale. The final episodes of Season 5 are titled Remember, Forget, Spend, Try and Conquer, which are all referencing Dale, when he quoted William Faulkner in Season 1. When asked why he winded his watch every day, Dale says, "I like what father said to son when he gave him the watch. I give it to you not that you may remember time, but that you may forget it for a moment now and then, and not spend all of your breath trying to conquer it." Space Spore. On the 22nd of January 2020, Robert Kirkman replied to a tweet asking what caused the zombies, and he said Space Spore, but months later retracted it, saying it was just a joke and that he wouldn't actually reveal it in a tweet. However, we have actually gotten rumours in the TV universe of what was first being said by people about the outbreak.
I heard it came back in a rocket, that it started in space. Somebody breathed it in, it turned their stomachs, then they got on a plane.
Shut up.
So it would be interesting if, even though we don't have a specific answer yet, the show universe is eventually going to go down that path. The Walking Dead movie trilogy. Shortly after Rick left the show, it was announced that there would be a Rick Grimes movie trilogy. Scott Gimple said it would be heavily sci-fi based and a lot like Logan in seeing this older, more damaged Rick. And about 7 months later, AMC released a teaser for it called Untitled The Walking Dead Movie, where in it we see Rick Grimes returns in big text and at the bottom even Universal. But over 2 years later they would turn it into 6 episodes. If what was going to happen in the movie just all happened in The Ones Who Live, then we got a really condensed version of it, which is a shame, but who's to say there won't be a Walking Dead movie one day. But even then, I don't think it ever needed movies. What it needed and still needs is just more good seasons of shows with Rick in it, and I think it will get it. Tyrese in Left 4 Dead. The actor for Tyrese, Chad L. Coleman, also plays Coach in Left 4 Dead, another iconic zombie title.
I found a burger tank in this place. I'm gonna be a one-man cheeseburger apocalypse.
Breaking Bad theory, even more valid. I think my favourite theory of all time is that the Breaking Bad universe is in the same universe as The Walking Dead.
That psychopath came back from the dead and he walked through that door.
I think it would be fine if they crossed over. I think they'd get on well.
You're nothing. You're such a...
And it's even more likely after the latest addition to the Breaking Bad universe, Better Call Saul. Of course, both AMC shows, but there's multiple Easter eggs, like a car Walter bought for Walt Jr. being really similar to what Glenn drove in The Walking Dead. Then when Skylar says to Walter he has to return it, she said the guy on the phone at the car dealership was called Glenn, and Walter was written to repeat the name.
Oh, and make sure you talk to the general manager. His name is Glenn.
I love to think Glenn worked at his dad's car dealership in New Mexico before moving to Atlanta, and had always wanted to drive such a cool car, which adds more depth into why he was so happy to drive it. The guy that was meant to return it never did, so he didn't get to try it. People have said to me before, wasn't he a pizza delivery driver in Georgia? Well, yeah, but he's got legs. Can he not travel? What does that even mean? Could he not have been in Albuquerque 3 years before going to Atlanta? And of course seeing Heisenberg's crystal in Merle Dixon's product bag in Season 2. And then in Season 4, Daryl describing the dealer that Merle would have got it from, and it's sounding a lot like Jesse Pinkman.
Merle had this dealer, this janky little white guy. One day we were over at his house watching TV. Wasn't even noon yet. We were all wasted. Merle was high. We were watching the show, and Merle was talking all this dumb stuff about it. He wouldn't let up. Merle never could. Turns out it was the Tweaker's kid's favorite show. He never sees his kid, so he felt guilty about it or something. So he punches Merle in the face. So I started hitting the Tweaker like hard as I can. He pulls a gun, sticks it right here. He says, "I'm gonna kill you, bitch."
The Heisenberg theme being played in Fear the Walking Dead Season 3. Gail's coffee machine appearing on Milton's desk, and they're both really similar people. Did they meet at college and both come up with it? But I'm not going to include when the governor said there was a member of Woodbury called Eisenberg, because he didn't say Heisenberg, did he? I don't think it would matter if he did.
Your friends killed 6 good people. Crowley, Tim, Gargiulio, Eisenberg, Bob Adams.
The word zombie was said a few times in Breaking Bad, but that doesn't matter. Remember, we spoke about the contradiction of the comic universe saying it a lot.
Zombies, 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 zombies. Zombies, 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 zombies.
And after Better Call Saul, it became even more likely because even though it was mostly set before Breaking Bad, it was a prequel. There were, of course, those black and white scenes set after it, and towards the end, it stopped being a prequel entirely and had whole episodes set after it, and at no point did it go past past August 2010, but El Camino is suspected to have ended in early September 2010. So when wildfire was declared fast rising and worldwide, that was when Jesse had moved to go and live deep into Alaska, completely isolated and completely unaware that The Walking Dead had just started. They're just fun Easter eggs, but if they were to do something with it, it could be an episode of Tales that doesn't even need to be canon, of Jesse in Alaska, finding out about it and surviving.
Should have gone to New Mexico.
Yeah.
Art of Death. In Season 9, Episode 15, Alpha killed 10 characters and put their heads on pikes. It was amazing. Their names were Ozzy, Alec, DJ Frankie, Tammy Rodney, Addie, Enid, Tara and Henry. And the first letters of their names altogether spells out Art of Death. And that amazing haunting music that plays when it's being revealed is also called Art of Death. Andrew Lincoln broke Jeffrey Dean Morgan's nose while filming this scene in Season 8, Episode 8. Abraham met Daniel from Fear the Walking Dead. At the end of the 3rd season of Fear, the dam explodes and we don't see how Daniel survived. We next see Daniel in Season 5 and he's in Texas. And around this time, Abraham would have been there too. And when this scene happened in Season 5, he would have just left.
Everything here, consider it yours, except for this. Friend asked me to save this for when things get better.
And these are the same brand of cigars that Abraham used. When he found them, things started to get better for him and he became unstuck. So the fact we see Daniel again and he's also happier and unstuck, it was certainly a reference that they had met. You can also see among Althea's tapes, Abe and Doctor along with DS for Daniel Salazar. So Abraham and Eugene did come across Althea and Daniel. I really wanted this to come up more in Fear. Perhaps Dwight mentioned it to Althea when he's telling her his story and Daniel sees it or overhears it and he finds out about what happened to Abraham and Glenn and that Dwight was a close part of it, and there's more tension there because of it. Because when we next see Daniel after the dam, he's a new person. I like to think Abraham and Eugene really helped him in making it as far as he did. This was just a theory but confirmed by Michael Cudlitz here, and this is from earlier this year, but years ago he said he was going to come back. It wouldn't be in Fear now because it ended, but it could be in Tower still. He was involved in that.
We've talked about that, like an origin story. There's a character in Fear who finds the tapes that were made by the reporter, and then later on one of the characters has a cigar. The implication is that it's Abraham. And we could have gone down that road, they still could. I would be open to it. So I had a blast playing him, so anything that we could go back and play with and have fun, sure.
I really want to see more of the characters from the past, and I know the audience does too. Or things that were referred to in the past that we never saw, so I'm determined to have it come back.
The Deep. Immunity. Among just speculation, there's been one pretty much undeniable example of this, with Alicia in Fear the Walking Dead. Alicia gets bitten and although she removes her arm, she was shown to be sick from it and was turning, but the radiation actually appeared to save her, and there was loads of symbolism later in the season, because June thought Alicia survived it. The idea was played with again in the next season when it was revealed that June had delayed wildfire on people but not fully put it off. So it actually does 100% delay wildfire, but Alicia completely stopped it. Whether this will be expanded on again is unclear right now. The CRM were looking for a cure. That was actually a big point of why they existed. That was their main aim we heard about. That's why they experimented on walkers, but that was the darker side of the CRM that Rick and Michonne defeated. At the end of World Beyond, we see the survivors of Omaha, the destroyed part of the CRM, making progress in some kind of walker decay, which suggests some type of resolution to the walkers, which we're going to talk about later. In the Daryl show, they played with the idea that Laurent, the kid that Daryl meets in France, could be immune. The characters in that season all thought he was, and that he could be the cure because he was born from a woman who had just turned, which is really similar to Ellie in The Last of Us. I would love it if they said that because Rick was literally dead to the world at the time wildfire basically activated, he surpassed whatever makes people turn. When I've entertained that thought before, people say wouldn't Carl have to be immune too then? But no, it's purely about Rick's body being in rest mode at the time wildfire was able to start bringing dead people back. It's not anything to do with genes, it's just his body hasn't got what other people have got when they were living and wildfire took over the world.
What's your wound?
People also say Jenna tested their blood, but I don't see how Jenna could know either, because remember, it's not really about Rick's blood or what Jenna could find from it. He didn't really understand a lot about wildfire.
You have no idea what it is, do you?
PPP. In Season 7, Episode 6, Tara and Heath were on a supply run and were outnumbered by walkers. Tara falls off the bridge and washes up at Oceanside, but this was the last time we saw Heath. When Tara returns, we just see his broken glasses, tyre marks, and a white card with PPP written on it. This was a big mystery, but it was pretty much solved in The Ones Who Live episode 6. As the CRM soldiers are getting ready to be briefed to take out Portland, behind Thorn you can see PPP Exception and Reclamation, and I go into it properly in my video I did on it recently, but we saw on Fear that Reclamation is removing life and evidence of the CRM from a certain area. So with PPP Exception, when the CRM attacks, people with the PPP card are made an exception and aren't taken out. They are identified by the soldiers as an exception. So that I think solves what it is, but as far as what the PPP specifically stands for, what it's abbreviating, I think it leans more into Priority Personnel Protection or Priority Placement Program. So if someone has this PPP card, why would they be spared? Why were they there to begin with? Well, minutes before we saw this whiteboard, General Bill said to Rick they have spies all around the world.
We have embeds, spies in selected communities throughout the continent and the world to monitor them, to potentially sabotage them, to influence their politics and approaches.
So PPP likely means an exception for the spies and or people that work for the CRM to get in, like Jadis. Or Heath himself could have actually been a spy, especially when he turns up at the gates of Alexandria after a time jump and he says he's just been on a supply run. Eugene wouldn't know if he was there before. He did what spies do. He socially engineered, he manipulated, and he just walked in. The former showrunner of the later seasons, Angela Kang, said, and I quote, "Those seeds were already set there," when we see the RV Heath and Tara were using at Jadis' scrapyard, so hinting Jadis did indeed take Heath and traded him. PPP has since appeared in an episode of Tales of the Walking Dead called Devon, where Devon holds that same type of white card with PPP on it, and also recently in Daryl Dixon season 3 you can see it on a blue work jacket, and it appears twice at this memorial where people leave stuff for people that have gone missing. And to remind you, we have seen spies before, Lance and the CRM. Remember, Lance was assigning this Shearer character to fake being Stephanie, the woman that Eugene was talking to on the radio, to get information out of them. She was also told to do exactly what Bill said their spies do: influence their politics, sabotage them. There was also Roman, who pretended to be a plumber and was working with Shearer. They were his two spies. And Lance very blatantly referenced the CRM quite a few times. It's only been 3 years since he said this, so a lot can still come from it.
I used some of them to send out a convoy full of supplies for that other thing. If something happens to me, certain alliances the Commonwealth has, certain stabilizing factors, are likely to become a problem.
So Lance was saying if he's no longer at the Commonwealth, it is no longer protected. The fate of the Vatos gang. In season 1, while trying to retrieve Rick's bag of weapons, Len is kidnapped by what we find out to be the Vatos. They go into their hideout and find out they're just looking after old people and have chihuahuas. And after finding out they weren't so bad, they're never seen again. Until a deleted scene in season 2 episode 1 that shows after the CDC they at first went to see if they could stay with the Vatos, but they had all been killed. Originally meant to tease the governor and Woodbury.
Y'all worried about walkers? I'd be much more worried about the people who came and did all this.
As far as why this scene was deleted, I would say maybe they did want the Vatos to survive somehow, or maybe it was a bit too much. But I think the scene itself is just really weird. I think Daryl is especially terrible.
Suck it! Shut your up,
Get a dictionary. Observant.
Unidentified helicopter solved. In the first episode, Rick sees a helicopter, and many have believed this to be the first sign of the CRM, who Rick was eventually taken by. But this is actually the same military we would go on to see in the 3rd season, and it would eventually crash, and the governor would first appear. So, similar to that deleted scene with the Vatos, I think this was essentially teasing the governor, as this was the catalyst to him being introduced. The orange backpack theory. There's a theory that the orange backpack means death. In season 3, episode 12, Rick, Michonne, and Carl drive past a survivor, and they ignore him asking for help. When they drive past again, he's dead. I would say the most convincing evidence of it bringing death is Daryl wearing it all of a sudden and Denise is killed. Then Carl uses it all of a sudden and he dies. And even before that, before Tyrese was bitten at the start of that episode, season 5 episode 9, in one of the scenes of them getting supplies all mixed in with foreshadowings of Tyrese being bitten later in the episode, Rick has an orange backpack on. I don't know how it would work if the theory suggests that it's the same orange backpack and that's why all this stuff happens, because we saw before they even got to Alexandria they didn't have that bag. I feel like Carl having it in this scene is more because it was the 100th episode and they were referencing the iconic episode where that first appeared, Clear, as it was referencing the first. Johnny Depp was in The Walking Dead. To infiltrate that first saviour outpost for the Hilltop, they have to find a walker head that they can make to look like Gregory, and this one was made with the likeness of Johnny Depp. Stranger Things quarry. The original Atlanta group's first camp was next to this big quarry called the Bellwood Quarry, and it's the same one that appears in Stranger Things. TIE Fighter Walker. In season 1 episode 2, a walker really sounds like a TIE Fighter from Star Wars. alternate swear scenes. There's certain scenes in The Walking Dead that have two different versions, one where the characters swear and one where they don't, and until recently we would only get the clean version of the scene, and you could only get the alternate swear scene on the DVD. When Negan introduced himself, he was meant to say F multiple times just like the comics, but I thought it sounded really bad compared to the one we got, where he comes across more composed and more in control, which I think is more scary and intimidating. So that is a time I think it's worked in their favour, but other times not so much.
They're screwing with the wrong people.
I think that scene suffered because of it. The mind of the Karen is fascinating to me. Can't stand that. It's crazy to me because after this scene, Negan would go on to obliterate two heads of characters. And it's obviously not really AMC's fault. Technically, it's obviously the complaints they're gonna get. In season 11, they obviously started to do it, and in the spin-offs, but there was a lot of scenes in the main show that I just don't think needed to be censored. Because no one cares in reality. It's the old woman complaining. Just keep doing it. Ignore it. Tobias. Tobias was a kid that appeared in the pilot of Fear the Walking Dead and the second episode, but was never seen again. He seemed to know before everyone else that the apocalypse was starting. The showrunner confirmed that he survived the initial outbreak, and so could appear again. It's intriguing that he seemed to know so much and was prepared for it. I imagine he went quite far and is still alive. But is it still a mystery if you don't care? My lone walker theory. It looks a bit arrogant me saying my theory, but I've got to say my one, or else you'll think I'm referencing the one where people say the lone walker was a whisperer or beta, which is silly because I think it's more profound. Of course, there's the real meaning that you should have got from watching it. It represents Shane and how he's becoming distant and estranged from the group. But a theory I came up with was suggesting that the ulterior meaning is that it also represents Rick, who was driving the car. We saw the lone walker in the intro from season 4, just before the title, a season largely based on Rick's humanity, but then was no longer shown after season 8 when Rick left, because Rick was no longer in the show. And there is a bigger part of the theory where you could go down the rabbit hole of it suggesting Rick will also turn in the end of The Walking Dead's main story, which is still going on. Rick obviously will return. I thought that was always obvious before Andrew Lincoln said,
yeah, well, there's a conversation happening right now.
When The Walking Dead does go into stuff again like Wildfire and New Walkers, I think Rick should be at the helm of it. He is the protagonist, whether he likes it or not. After that, I think he could die. I would have said he could have got his comic death because they're going down that road in so many ways now, but I kind of feel like Daryl feels more like that guy in the comics. That was Rick, that went through everything. He used to be, oh, poor Rick, but he was living in luxury in a city. It's Daryl that's been in the thick of it. Dark Unknown. Characters' dreams tell the future. In season 7 episode 16, a scene set before Abraham's death, Sasha wakes up and says that she had a dream that her and Abraham went to the beach and he died. Her dream was warning them both not to go, but they did, and Abraham did die, and she would later sacrifice herself to kick off the war. But I think what's even more eerie is in season 11 episode 3, Rosita says she's been having dreams about Abraham, that he's trying to tell her something. She says she knows it's something important, something she's supposed to do, but she can't hear him most of the time, and just when she's about to, he gets shot in the head. She died 21 episodes later. In season 9 episode 5, Rick has a vision of being in an unfamiliar city with a swarm of helicopters flying towards him, which not only foretold how he would be saved at the end of the episode, but foretold what happened to him years after he was taken, and what we'd see in The Ones Who Live, and that was way before it was revealed. These are characters that haven't just had dreams about the future, they've had warnings from visions. Really interesting. I've always said, pay attention to when they mention dreams. Webisode origins. There's Walking Dead webisodes and they give backstories to iconic things in The Walking Dead. In Torn Apart we see Hannah, who had gone to become the bicycle walker. And in The Oath we see Paul and Karina. When Karina joined his group, they made the oath, one lives, all live. It's just them surviving until Paul gets injured, so she brings him to a hospital where we meet Dr. Gail Marcones, likely the woman who was looking after Rick while he was in a coma. And we see that the room behind these doors is where Marcones kept the dead. But after she assumes Paul is dying, she puts him in there, and so Karina thinks she's alone, so Marcones gives her a lethal injection. Paul wakes up and gets out, and in seeing what she did, it's implied he shoots her, and then writes on those doors, "Don't open, they're inside." The Necronomicon from Evil Dead is in The Walking Dead. In season 9 episode 5, when Rick stumbles into this cabin, you can see it on the floor there, it's basically a magic book. Phones. Phones have appeared many times now in The Walking Dead. When Rick had ones drawn on by Benjiro in The Ones Who Live, which I think is silly, you could have charged it, but you could do drawing shit on it. And when Aaron actually had one charged to show pictures of the Commonwealth to another group. In season 5, when Aaron met Rick's group, he had bad quality physical photos from a film camera. Being stuck in the middle of 2010, it's an iPhone 4S. I think they intended to make it the iPhone 4, but it's actually the iPhone 4S, and you can tell because of this line here, which came out in 2011, so it's a bit of an error. In season 5, episode 13, Olivia Andrea mentioned keeping it in her pocket.
I still like carrying around my cell phone, too. One of these days it's gonna ring and freak my out.
So people still have them and they could charge it to look at pictures, but obviously no Wi-Fi or service. There's also been times where you can see the actors' phones in their pockets, which you would consider filming mistakes, but we can rationalise it as just keeping it with them still, and maybe looking at pictures. I feel like Negan would keep his phone to look at pictures of his wife, and to watch his favourite YouTuber. Babies could be immune. So similar with what we said about Rick, with him being in a coma, dead to the world when wildfire started bringing people back, he may have surpassed whatever activates it, but with babies, they weren't even born yet when it happened, so they may also be immune. However, we have seen Walker kids before, so this would suggest that perhaps the kids of the main character's kids don't all get it passed on to them. Sorry, brother. In season 2, episode 11, Dale is attacked by a Walker and Herschel says he won't make it, and Rick goes to put him out of his misery, but Daryl sees he's struggling and decides he can do it, and when he does, he says,
"Sorry, brother."
And we find out in the Survival Instinct game that I mentioned earlier that Daryl's dad, William Dixon, is attacked by Walkers. Daryl struggled to put him down, so his uncle Jesse takes the gun and says the exact same thing that Daryl would go on to say to Dale.
"Sorry, brother." "Sorry, brother."
Daryl got it from his uncle Jesse. GTA reference. In GTA 5, if you go here on the map, you can find these police officers with Grimes and Kirkman on their name tags. Of course, those two names together, and being on similar uniform to what Rick wore in the show and in the comics, it is an Easter egg to The Walking Dead. Graffiti. Over the years, there's been really interesting graffiti seen all around in scenes of The Walking Dead that actually foreshadowed stuff that we'd see in the future. But the weirdest thing is that it probably wasn't part of production, it wasn't them that did it. On Rick's bridge before he blew it up, it says Wes with a love heart sprayed on the side. We'd later meet Wes in Fear the Walking Dead. I didn't care much of him and he turned out to be rather awful, but he brought the paint storyline that would tease Madison's return, and him being the character that did the painting makes a lot of sense. That this was an actual official teaser for Fear, and when he first appeared it was just months after this episode. In season 8 episode 11, you can see CR on the bridge behind Daryl. The CRM, the Civic Republic, the CR would later take Rick. John Bernicker. On July 12, 2017, while filming season 8 episode 7, he was the stunt double for a smaller character called Mark, who we only briefly saw before being killed off screen because they were doing this stunt where Dwight would shoot him and he would fall off the balcony, but he fell and missed the safety pads. He injured his head and he died in hospital 2 days later. His family was awarded $8.6 million settlement in a wrongful death lawsuit. Harrison Memorial. You know that thing that was going around in 2020? Well, the first case of that was found in Kentucky was first identified and isolated at the Harrison Memorial Hospital, the exact same place where Rick wakes up from a coma and we first see The Walking Dead's apocalypse. France. Jenna said France was the last place to fall, and that's where the most powerful walker type currently resides until let out. The writing at the top left of the room translates to "the dead are born here," extremely likely indicating that wildfire did start and or was created in France. It could also be saying that something a lot worse was made from wildfire in France too.
They stayed in the labs till the end. They thought they were close to a solution.
Primrose and Violet team. In that end credit scene for World Beyond, before that woman was killed, a Primrose and Violet team was mentioned. They're said to be teams responsible for the outbreak, which is good because that means the new walkers are from the source of the original walkers. I think that's important. Microwave incident. In New Mexico on the 26th of October 2016, Damon Perry, 23, was binge watching The Walking Dead with his friend while drinking when he killed his friend with an electric guitar and a microwave because he thought he was turning into a zombie and attempted to bite him. He was then running around with a knife and was tackled by construction workers until police arrived. But this was 3 days after the Glenn and Abraham episode aired, so I don't know if I buy that he thought his friend was a zombie because he was that intoxicated on just drink. On my limited information, I would say he just wanted to copy Negan and be cruel to his friend. 14 years. In The Ones Who Live, General Bill told Rick that humans have 14 years left. He thinks the masses of zombies will just take over and they will develop into something different. It would be interesting if in that amount of time from The Ones Who Live, we start to see this type of walker, and that's what he meant. And in a way, even though he did horrible stuff, he was right. Just how he went about it, of course, wasn't. There is an episode of Tales called Amy Dr. Everett, and some say it's 35 years into the apocalypse, but I can't find a source on that, so I don't believe it. Bill predicting that they only have 14 years left, which is why he went to the measures he did, is more interesting to me. A cure and the end of the walkers. So as I briefly mentioned earlier, at the end of World Beyond, we see the survivors of Omaha making progress in walker decay.
This rate of
waste-based decay is extraordinary.
And all of this could be used in future storylines, even though it hasn't been since, to eventually help eradicate wildfire. I think what we saw in A World Beyond is leaning more into the side of spreading something across the world that destroys walkers rather than curing wildfire, whereas the radiation stuff leaned more into stopping people from turning when they are bitten. Bottom line is, the idea of a cure and immunity has been entertained along with the idea of walkers eventually winning. So if this really does become an issue in the future, this is likely the solution to what Bill said. Season 12. We know there's a lot more story to come in different Walking Dead shows, but Scott Gimple said his dream would be to bring back the annual 16-episode seasons again.
My dream would be another 16-hour-a-year series. We're talking about that, but different ways that we do the show, we have to do it, and we will. Which
in some sense I think will happen. I don't know if I see a season 12 happening exactly like how the main show did it, but I do see all the main characters from the main show and Fear and even World Beyond uniting eventually. I mean, I don't really need the World Beyond kids, but the Fear characters would still be good. I think there really is so much still they could do, and I'm not talking about one final show to wrap it up. I think they should get amazing again and then just keep going for a few more seasons. No end in sight.
When Robert Kirkman started the comic, when he pitched the comic, he pitched it as a zombie movie that never ends. And, you know, we want to honor that pitch.
I've always seen the current ongoing Walking Dead story as the Grimes saga, a bit like with the Skywalker saga in Star Wars, where stories can exist out of it, but the main show story is really still going across different shows. The way that it's being talked about is, even after we've seen the last of Rick and Daryl in the next 15 years, stories will still happen from before and after that has taken place, about outbreak stories and the future of the universe. There's really unlimited stuff they could do, it's just whether AMC will continue to do it. So this is my new and updated The Walking Dead Iceberg for 2025. What do you think? Did you learn anything that you didn't know before? Is there anything you would add to it? Let me know what you think down below. After 15 years of The Walking Dead, all the stuff that's happened and still going strong, I think there's so much greatness within The Walking Dead, and although it doesn't always come to light nowadays, I think there's more to come. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you go and check out my Breaking Bad Iceberg Part 2, where it's basically a much broader version of my first one. It gets surprisingly dark, and there's even more Walking Dead stuff in it that I didn't talk about in this one. I think you'd love that video, go and enjoy that. And check out my latest What If video, What If Tyree Survived. If you want to know how different it would be and what would happen in the show if he lived, I think this is a really accurate retelling of it, so go and enjoy that. Press the like button if you enjoyed it, subscribe with the notification bell set to all so you never miss videos like this. Thank you for watching, I'll see you soon.